Oz. There's somebody still in the room. AI Media. High Tide Media, they can't say anything because they're doing all the recording, but he's punching his fist in the air. And the World Wide Web Consortium. All right, last thing to do, and we're on time, is we do our roll call. Remember from yesterday, this is a very, very brief one. Just say your name, who you are, for the benefit of everyone else in the room, particularly if they can't see you or hear you. Well, if they can't hear you, this isn't quite going to work. But it helps orientate everyone as we go around. So 2 microphones starting on opposite sides of the room. Hand it over to you, Vidya.
Vidya from VISABILITY.
Glenn Pearson from the Telephone Kids Institute.
Jason McKee from Accessibility Shield.
Greg Madsen from GAM Industries.
Eric Webb from Blind Citizens WA and Deaf Blind West Australians.
Jason O'Neill from Culture Amp.
Mark Jeffrey from Services Australia.
Natalie Collins from Thinkrum and the Australian Digital Inclusion Alliance.
Troy Waller from Microsoft Education. Sorry, I missed my yay, but I am here.
Daniel Franklin, ABC.
Christos Petru from Centre for Inclusive Design.
Eloise Cleary, Centre for Inclusive Design.
Scott Sumner, Centre for Inclusive Design.
Bree Norton from Synergy and also the Aussie Way conference convener.
Steve King from Atlassian.
Christy O'Brien, WebKey IT.
Amanda Meath, WebKey IT.
Karen Myers, W3C.
Adam Sifsioglu, Intopia.
Mark Muscat, Digital Access Solutions and Assistive Technology.
Lydia Neville sitting on the chair.
Mark Blowers, Access WA and Parasports Motivation.
Rosemary Spark, Web Accessibility Champion.
Annette Ferguson, iClick to Learn.
Alison Ravenhall, Intopia. Jess Budd, HBF.
Julie Grundy, Intopia.
Jerry Newstadel, Australian Broadcasting Corporation.
And Jane Otts from Gesby.
Matthew Putland, Vision Australia.
Matheus Ferreira, State, São Paulo State University.
Brad Elber from the Department of Education.
Sharon Maloney, Department of Education.
Tracy Piper, Curtin University.
Matthew Thackwell, Tiny.
Ben Long, Tiny.
Chris Layton, University of Western Australia.
Alfred Lowe, Department of Education.
Claire Chamberlain, Child and Adolescent Health Service.
Alex Norton, Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade.
Andrew Norman, University of Melbourne.
Okay, have we got everyone? Oh, Zell, there's always one.
Don't you just forget. Hi, I'm Zell Ishtel from WebKey IT and Inclusive World.
Excellent. And the silent people in the room are from High Tide Media. So at the back we have... Who? Cole. And over on the other side we have Mitch. All right, thank you very much, everyone. That was really quick and really well. To start off today, we actually have 2 video recordings to play for you from visitors who are unable to attend. Just like to pay attention to the main screen. We'll get that started in a tick. First one is actually from Senator Steele John.
There to the wonderful Humans of the Australian Accessibility Conference being held this year in Perth. Welcome. My name's Jordan Steele John. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for giving me the opportunity to share a message with you today and for the work that you do. As we all know, access and inclusion is not only incredibly important for disabled people, but also for our broader community. When you make something accessible and inclusive, you're making accessible and inclusive not just for disabled people, but for everybody, making society a better place in the process. This is the understanding that sparks the flame of the passion that I know lives in the heart of every one of you in the room today, and I'm so sorry I can't be with you in person. Enjoy your time together, share ideas, share experiences, keep that passion alive. We together are part of a movement for the transformation of Australian society, and we
are paused and will resume.
Are winning in that work. Thank you so much for all you do. I really look forward to working with each and every one of you in the days, months and years ahead as we build that inclusive and accessible community for everyone.
Thank you, Senator. My apologies to the Senator for severely mucking that up. And we have one other recording. This is actually from... Oh, hang on. Not there, it's not. Now, if everyone remembers, I did a prayer on the first day. I should have done it this morning, shouldn't I? Okay, and our second recorded message is from Regine Gilbert. Inclusive Design.
My name is Regine Gilbert, and I am a professor and author of Inclusive Design for a Digital World. I hope that you all are having a wonderful conference, and I want to thank you for taking a few moments to watch me. I wrote my book, Inclusive Design, for people who are newer to accessibility. There's a lot of us who know a lot about accessibility, but there are so many others who do not know much about it. In my experience teaching, I have found that a lot of my students know very little about accessibility, and so it was my intent with the book to answer the questions that I've so often been asked. One of the things that I start off with in the book is asking a question for people. Have you ever been left out of something? Have you ever wanted to go somewhere and couldn't go to that place? That's what I want people to think about when they are creating products, when they are creating experiences. Who are you including? Are you making sure that you are making things accessible for everyone? It is my hope that you all continue to have a wonderful conference, and I want to thank you for taking the time out to watch this video. If you know anyone that is new to accessibility, I would recommend Inclusive Design for a Digital World. Thank you again for your time. Have a wonderful day.
Let's have a round of applause for our two presenters, been unable to be here. I'll just check with Bree, are we able to publish both of those videos? I'll put them on the website. Okay, and my sincerest apologies to the Senator for missing out the first 1 minute and 13 seconds of his presentation. It was a bit unnerving when I saw it for the very first time this morning because he stares at you and then talks about welcome humans. So rest assured, the rest of the video is very, very similar. Okay, so we now move into our next speaker for this morning. Just give me one moment again. Okay, so I'm going to be introducing Glenn Pearson. So Glenn is actually from, if I remember correct, a keynote speaker is actually about Aboriginal health, correct? And we're just waiting for technology to wake itself up. I think that's correct. Okay, please join with me in welcoming Glenn to the stage.
Tap on the glass, about a minute to go. All right. Very good. Good morning, everybody. I've been up since about 4:30 this morning. I had a meeting at 5 a.m. about a Streptococcus A vaccine that we're trying to develop to ideally rid rheumatic heart disease in Aboriginal communities. So I've had several cups of coffee. I'm just giving you a warning, that's all. So good morning. My name's Glenn Pearson, and I'd like to thank you, Bree, for the invitation to come along and connect with you today, and to be part of the story that you're making here about better understanding the world that we all live in and making better connections, which is fundamentally the core of my work at the Telethon Kids Institute. I'm the Deputy Director of Aboriginal Health at the Telethon Kids Institute. We have 4 major areas of research, of which Aboriginal health is one. And we made a deliberate decision several years ago to fully integrate Aboriginal health as a core function of the Institute. My experience of working in the state and Australian government, there's 15 years of that, I've been in the Institute for about 16 years, has been that Aboriginal health, like a lot of things Aboriginal, tends to be structured as a conversation or a story that sits outside of the core of the mainstream. It sits on the edge of town. So everyone does what they do in the middle, and then they usually try and do something for Aboriginal people on the edge. The ambition here is an acknowledgement that these kids, while they're Aboriginal, are also Australian kids, and that we need to bring those needs into the middle of what we do. So I think there's some interesting parallels in terms of the work here that you've been doing, and definitely the ambition that I have at the Telethon Kids in the work that I do as the Deputy Director. In starting, I needed to, as a Noongar, I'm a Noongar, so I'm not from, this is Whadjuk country. My family are traditionally, on my mother's side is from the Minang, which is Albany, and the Wadjuri, which is the Esperance Ravensthorpe area, and on my mother's father's side is Ewart country, which is on the Victoria Plains. My father's a Wadjula, so he's English, and his mother's Jewish, so I've got it pretty covered. And there's a lot of history, Jewish history of mine in Vic Park, so in some regards I'm coming back to another part of the Budja. But this is the Budja, this is the home, this is the country of the Whadjuk people. I want to thank them very deeply for allowing us to be on their country. They were never asked that they'd want us here, but they've been very generous in having us here. And to ask it, we not only respect their stories and their songs and their ambitions, but they also ask for us, the elders ask for us to do good business with each other, for our families and for our communities. So I want to acknowledge them in the work that we do and in starting today. The heading of my presentation was Aboriginal Health, Disability and the Strategic Plan. That was the one that Bree gave me, so I just went with it. So what I've done is try to present it in a way that isn't so much talking to your technical competence, in the work that you do. I think there's an assumed, we can assume that we both have a shared ambition to want to be able to use whatever skills and our abilities to bring us together, to make a better place, a better quality of life for all people, regardless of the challenges or not. And the ambitions that all of us have and the skills that we bring, that's quite central to here. So I didn't want to necessarily talk to that. I wanted to, if I may, with your permission, talk to you in the way that I talk to the researchers at the Telethon Kids Institute. They are exceptionally bright, shiny buttons. There's about 750 of them there. We're completely focused on child health research and the full spectrum of research that we do at the Institute, from the basic sciences around childhood cancers to cystic fibrosis to vaccine trials and development of vaccines, through to big population data, linkage projects, through to working on community on really big challenges that are happening for our families. So we cover the full spectrum of research. We cover the full state, 2.5 million square kilometres. That's a fairly decent backyard. I often say when I'm over east, I'm glad that we don't have to mow it. And we do work both nationally and increasingly internationally. So this little tiny hub that's got itself located at the new Perth Children's Hospital, which is an amazing facility. I've, like I said, been there since about 2004, 2005. So I've got a number of slides. The idea is that I'd want to talk to these researchers, not so much the science, their technical capacities, because I've sort of got those and they're developing, but really about them as researchers, them as human beings. And that really is the sort of central theme of my story today, to connect with you as other humans, me as to connecting to you. So I'll move very quickly, if I may. So out the front of the Telethon Kids entrance, at the northern entrance, we have a monument that commemorates that we're on Noongar Whadjuk Budja. And when I went to the elders to talk to them, particularly Uncle Richard Wally, he said it's one thing to acknowledge that we're actually on country, but we should put a challenge to it. It's not just the acknowledgement of those obvious things. And so the challenge that we came up with was around, in Noongar, translated into English, was upon this traditional and sacred land we gather to work together for our children and their future. That's pretty good business, I reckon. Yeah. So what I've done is I've got a couple of headings and then a bit of content, but these are sort of the type of headings that I'd use with my researchers to get them to start thinking about them in terms of developing themselves as a human being, as a researcher. And at the fundamental of it, it's about being responsible with your science. I think research, like a lot of areas of investigation, exploration, has a great propensity to get interested about itself, to go and look into that particular phenomena, to better understand it, to come back to think about it, and then make some statements and recommendations about going forward. And the Institute, we're 30 years old this year, which is fantastic. We were started by Fiona Stanley. There was a group of about half a dozen people. Like I said, now there's about 750 of us. So she's been really successful in her model, but the world that we live in, from the one that we first started, is a lot more accountable to the community in regards to the work that we do, in terms of the clear and unmitigated need to have the community in our work, for them to help us design, to set the direction around that. It's their kids, it's their families, it's their communities, it's their money. I think even at a good manners level, we ought to start there, you know what I mean? A lot of those are key features in doing business with the Aboriginal community. You can't progress a conversation or do anything meaningful unless you have those central sort of aspects, elements in your work, in your approach. And it's all underpinned by this next one, which is joining the dots, staying connected, and about relationships. Aboriginal culture is a very strongly relationship-based culture. It doesn't really care about what you do, it really wants to know who you are. Yeah, and it operates very much at that level. It's about mutual respect, mutual understanding, about connecting, a relationship that's predicated one on trust. Because you can imagine with the history that we've had, that we didn't have a hand in, but we've inherited, and the fact that today's the National Sorry Day anniversary that Kevin Rudd set. And then yesterday, Scott Morrison, the Prime Minister, then announced, which I'll touch on, 12 years after setting the Closing the Gap challenge, how we've progressed. This sort of talks to the relationship that we may, like I said, have had a hand in designing, but we've definitely inherited. And it's the challenge that we have in going forward together as a people. But joining the dots, there's about 240 remote communities in WA. With those, there's all the different language groups that go with that. With that goes all the different stories and the histories of who they are. And rather than seeing that as something that's awkward because it doesn't fit into a neat box, I think once we look at it from a diversity perspective, it's an incredibly rich, beautiful way to be able to connect in the world in a way that we sometimes don't, and lose some of the magnificence of who we are. So joining the dots is really important. Staying connected, relationships are really important. Some of our relationships tend to be we come in, do a transaction of business, and then we nick off. Research is a classic like that. Yeah, we come in, do all the research, the bright lights of the research, collect the data, go do the analysis, come back, do a PowerPoint presentation, and then all they see is the lights of the cars moving back out. We have to change the relationship. We have to change the relationship. We can't do that anymore. And we can't look at research that comes in and works its way through all the different circumstances, what's happening in a person's life or a family's life or a community's life. I need to focus on lungs and skin and ears when we don't deal with the issues of intergenerational trauma or do the issues of poverty. This calls for a way deeper commitment from us as an organisation, as researchers individually and collectively, about how we represent, advocate and work with Aboriginal families. So, joining the dots, staying connected in relationships is really important. Meaning making. Whose meaning are you making? One of the big challenges for researchers is that they'll come from a particular perspective, usually a scientific one, that's dressed up like it's the colour of water, but from an Aboriginal perspective, I know it's a very white perspective. They'll come in with mainstream views and reference points and so the science will dress it up as being objective. But my experience is knowing that it is very subjective. Science is science, but who gets to tell the story, how they tell the story, and where they tell that story is part of this that I challenge our researchers to start thinking about. Well, whose meaning are you making? And if you don't have a relationship with the other, like a real relationship, how will you know? So I think that's really important. A challenge that I put to our research to develop those sort of relationships and know more about it, because a lot of people who work in the area of Aboriginal health have little or no relationship to Aboriginal people. But a lot of us have very developed opinions and views around what we ought to do to sort out the Aboriginal problem. And scientists aren't immune to those sort of phenomena. Anyway, one of the stories that science is really good at is repeating again the story of Aboriginal health and wellbeing, and it's usually one that's presented into the domain as broken and busted. I've got a number of slides that were released yesterday in regards to the closing the gap. I'm just going to move through those and just touch on them lightly, and for you to imagine what that must be like to be an Aboriginal person to hear that. And to remember that this is the 12th time that the Prime Minister's come out this time of the year in opening Parliament and made these statements around these particular targets, which is seemingly fairly pragmatic and fairly practical, but clearly they're frustrating us all. So in terms of childhood mortality, the target was to halve the gap in mortality rates for Indigenous children under 5 within a decade, and that was by 2018. We're 2020, it's not met. I won't go through necessarily the detail of that, but what's happened is while there has been some closing the gap, the mortality rates of the mainstream has increased significantly, and the incremental growth in child mortality rate or reduction has been so slow that it's looking like it's standing still. In terms of early childhood education, the target was 95% of all Indigenous 4-year-olds enrolled in early childhood education. By 2025, it's on track. So there are some movements. The attendance rates are pretty hard and tough outside of the major regional centres. They're doing a lot of work in the inner cities. That seems to be getting some tractions. Early education, as we know, education full stop is really critical. Early education is really important for a lot of our families because a lot of these kids come from environments where they need that sort of early engagement into the system to be able to get better assessment and supports for them to develop language and learning, lifelong learning, which starts very early in our child's life, because we know that those first 8 years of a child's life are very critical. And so if early education isn't plugged in and engaging our families early, our kids are going to struggle. I'm a primary school teacher. I know that if a child is assessed at year 1 as having a language delay, that child won't catch up to their peer where they need to be for another 2 years, and that 2-year lag will increase. And that's assuming that all things stay constant. But if that child lives in a circumstance that's pretty tough, there's a likelihood that even that will delay again. Excuse me, I might grab that glass of water. The next one is around school attendance. So the target is close the gap between Indigenous and non-Indigenous school attendance within 5 years. By 2018, it's just not been met. So even though we've now got compulsory education to year 12, and there's a whole range of systems around marshalling kids to stay in school and a whole range of efforts, we're still just not connecting at the fundamentals. We're still not getting kids to be able to stay in the course long enough. We know that there's a big gap between year 6 and moving into high school, and we know that by year 9, a lot of our kids have already made the decision that they want out. So that's not very old, that's 14 years of age. And if we know that education is, lifelong learning is the thing that really can enable our kids to come out of poverty and get those opportunities, and they're not there, then our kids are going to struggle. In terms of literacy and numeracy, halve the gap in Indigenous children in reading, writing and numeracy within a decade by 2018. Again, not met, but with improvements. So we're talking about a set of indicators that have been 12 years of concentrated Australian jurisdictional, state and territory and local community engagement. I'll move to the next one. In terms of Year 12 attainment, half the gap for Indigenous Australians aged between 2024 in Year 12 attainment or equivalent attainment rates. That's a lot. It's on track. So we've got kids staying in course, trying to keep them longer in the education system. Obviously, the new state legislation around kids going to Year 12 has enabled that. But we're still getting kids that are still struggling to qualify at the end of school. Employment. So the target was half of the gap in employment outcomes between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians within a decade. 2018, not met but stable. Well, it doesn't take a scientist to work out if you haven't got a good early education and not staying in primary school and not having good high school education, the likelihood of being able to get a job is going to be even less likely. And similarly, poverty is a huge, big driver of stress in the lives of Aboriginal families and their ability to be able to look after themselves, look after their kids and participate freely. So again, the onset of these failure of upstream interventions. In terms of life expectancy, when it's all said and done, all of these things, it's about a quality of life. So it's not just about living longer, it's about having a good quality of life. And we still have a gap of about 10 to 15 years. So close the life expectancy gap by a generation, so by 2031, it's just not on track. It's just not on track. When we look at it in terms of some real terms, what I've got a slide here is the Department for Child Protection has published these sort of figures around the number of kids, both Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal, that are in state care in terms of the total of kids that have been made wards of the state. There's 9,379 kids in state care, and of those kids, 2,437 are Wadjala kids or non-Aboriginal kids, and 2,942 are Aboriginal kids. So they're about 57% of all kids in state care are Aboriginal kids. And in some regions, they are 100% of all the kids in state care who have been made wards of the state. When you think about these numbers, in terms of the families that these kids come from, then we start to get a sense of the magnitude and the scale of when we have the failure of generations of upstream government policy impacting on the lives of families, and in this case on the lives of kids. This is the scale of the issues that we're dealing with. And my background is I've worked in the Department for Child Protection for 10 years when I first started in the state public service, and I do know that inevitably welfare kids create welfare kids create welfare kids. And I do know personally, because my mum was part of the stolen generation, is that my native welfare files, when I look at them, take my history back to the church and to the state for about 173 years of almost the state's 200 years of being made a state. And while that sounds exceptional, it's not. I'm just one of a range of Aboriginal people where the state and the church have participated in the lives of our families in the way that they have. And the ramifications of those policies are still being felt, as indicated in this table here. But what if? But what if these measures were measures of resilience? What if they were measures of strength? If you take any loving, thriving, excited, passionate culture and you were to subject them to the policies that have been subjected to on Aboriginal people in both removal of kids from country, removal of kids from family, in terms of the 1905 Act, which has owned and controlled Aboriginal lives from the cradle to the grave, who they could marry, who they could live with, who they couldn't live with, where they could work, where they couldn't work. And up until 1954 in Perth, you had to be out of the centre of Perth. And if you weren't, you were arrested. These aren't things that have happened hundreds of thousands of years ago or 200 years ago. These are things that we are now living with as a consequence, and they're living right here. But if you were to subject any loving group of people to those sort of policies, would you expect any other outcomes but those? Well, you wouldn't. In actual fact, you'd expect them to be almost flatlined. So if we were to invert and reframe those measures as rather than measures of broken and bustedness, but of one of resilience and strength and capacity to want to stay in the game and be part of it, then that might help us start to think about taking a way stronger strength-based approach in terms of all the things that we do. That from where the mainstream sees us as broken and busted, there's incredible strength that holds us. In spite of all the things that are going on, our parents love their kids, they want good things for them, they'll do what they need to do with the capacity they've got to be able to get them into the game. They're proud of who they are, where they're from, they want to celebrate. If you look at the NAIDOC week and how it's just grown and grown and grown, and now it becomes part of who we are, these are all good signs. Even the fact that we've got the Prime Minister coming up and talking about the recognition of Aboriginal people in the Constitution, or not. And even today when you had Senator Hanson coming out and once again blaming Aboriginal people and taking the responsibility from white people participating here, I go, that's not bad. We need to have this conversation. These are the signs of a maturing country. This is about us reconciling with ourselves and coming together. They are really important. And it's very much the conversation I have with the researchers at the Institute. They aren't just scientists who objectively work into people's lives. When we invite ourselves into people's lives, we take on a responsibility. We have to action that responsibility, not in the terms of which we are comfortable with it, by going the distance. If it means we're going to be doing some of these projects and we think a 3 or 5 year project is going to resolve it, forget about it. I say to some of the scientists, some of these projects you're doing, you might be doing this for the next 20, 30 years. Do you want to do it? Because if you don't, that's okay. If you don't, that's okay. But if you do, that's what you're going to be up for. Because that's the work that we need to do. We can't just do the potpourri projects approach to health. We need to get right into the middle of it. So the other one is around, for our mob, we love the big story. So tell the story big, then small, then big again. We love that big story. We want to know the whole lot. A lot of people come in, researchers come in, they'll go, all right, I want to ask that question, that one, that one, that. They only say, no. You got to tell the whole story. Tell the big story. Because then what you watch our mob do is start to orientate themselves into what you think you want to ask them. And then they'll start by way of a yarn around trying to work out where you are, so then they can start providing you with the story that you're looking for. Again, all predicated on trust and respect, about knowing. And our mob are very much around intuitive, around working with who you are, about whether you got the right heart or you just want to get there and become a PhD superstar, or whether you want to get in there and do something good for the community. So that's a really important bit. This is one that I put to the researchers around developing research methodologies that are as sophisticated as the worlds and culture that our families live in. I touched on earlier about the diversity of Aboriginal culture. We haven't got the market cornered. The mainstream, Skippy the Bush Kangaroo's got you got a very diverse world. And to assume that you're all just the colour of water or the colour of white, I don't. My experience, I grew up in Cloverdale. I have my own experiences, and those families are just as funky as each other. You know, there's a brilliance, there's a magnificence out there, and science has a great way of trying to objectify and dumb down. I think there's a beautiful richness in the lives of our community, and most definitely the community that you represent here, that is just waiting to glow and be part of and make the contributions to our side about understanding us better, seeing diversity as a strength, not as something that has to be managed into a box. It's made neat. There's nothing neat about it. Life's messy and it's meant to be, because that's what makes it exciting. And so we need to have research methodologies that are as exciting, as sophisticated as those worlds. Because if we don't, then we're telling someone else's story. We're telling someone else's story. We're telling your story, how you see the world and not their world. And if you want to make recommendations to government around policy and those initiatives or whatever it is, then you're going to talk to a world that doesn't even exist in that world. And it's any wonder then we have 12 years of the Prime Minister getting up there and talking about how these closing the gap targets, these really practical, simple ones, just aren't working, because we haven't got the sophisticated approaches in our relationships of doing business that allows these things to work together in the way they need to. The consequence of generations of government policy is that Aboriginal people have a welfare relationship with the state, not just in terms of welfare and employment checks, but a welfare relationship. And that means to me that someone outside of your world, because they have the power and authority and position, make decisions about what's your interests. And then when it doesn't work, they expect you to clean it up. We need to change that relationship. We need to empower our mob to be in the middle of those decisions so they can take responsibility for what they do in the way that they need the support, like any of us. And research has a great capacity to do that as well. So I'm very much around challenging our researchers. Don't get into this sort of welfare thing. You're going to do something to come and save us. You can't save yourselves. Don't try and come and save us. We'll work with you though, because our future's tied up with yours. Absolutely. And the non-negotiable need for Aboriginal voice. That's quite critical. I've got a small little YouTube. I won't play it, but it'll be part of it. It's by a gentleman who I love dearly and adore. His name's Ian Trust. He's in Kununurra. I've known Ian when I had hair and I had colour in it. He still looks the same. He's gorgeous. He heads the Wernan Foundation in Kununurra, and he's created this story called Swimming the River. It's a beautiful little vignette story of taking to his community the challenge that we have around, and it's a conversation that only the community can have with themselves. This isn't the space for government to come and tell us how it's going to be. These are the stories about a community making a decision around the world that they want to have, the world that they want to see. And if it's not the one they want, then what are the things they've got to do to change it? It's a beautiful little story. So if you get a chance to have a look at it, I'd please have a look at it. He's an exceptional gentleman. He's on our Aboriginal Advisory Board at the Institute, but he does an amazing work. So that's my plug for that one, and it's a nice little one if you want an exemplar of something that I really love. And it tells the story, it's capturing, and it gets people. It brings people together. Martin Luther King talks about truth being armed or unarmed truth, and science can be the same. So armed truth tells a story, but it blows us apart. We become more strangers than ever. But unarmed truth is the truth, but it brings us together. It connects us around what are we going to do about this. So this is a really nice unarmed truth one. So I want to talk about the stuff we're doing at the Telethon Kids Institute. How long have I got left? 5. Great. That's all I need. I'll move through this pretty quickly. Under our strategic plan, which got launched at the March of last year, February of last year, we announced a number of things. One is that Aboriginal health is going to be a priority health focus for the Institute for the next 5 years. The Institute has now signalled an ambition to want to be the global leader in Indigenous child health research in the world, which is pretty ambitious. I want that to be defined by what the community thinks is global leader, world famous, rather than a whole bunch of scientists. The other one was a recommitment to the closing the gap and signalling exactly what I've just said. We can no longer work our way through the entrails of the experience of Aboriginal families and avoid all the obvious things. We need to bolt ourselves in and go for the long haul on those right issues. And the fourth one was around the development of these grand challenges. These are projects that will, by definition, are going to define us as an organisation and our value to the broader community. So this one was on Aboriginal families. So there's the aim and the purpose is around, it's a world first scientific program that's going to focus completely and solely on families. It's going to look at families in terms of with young kids, and we want to look at developing up over a 5-year period, setting all the right relationships up first, working through the strengths of the community, to develop up the right governance structures, to get the right voices around the table in the first, to seek their permission to do this work with a view of opening up a space around families. And by then enrolling families, we're looking at households, so anyone who lives in the house, and then ideally with kids that are under 5. But the broader objective in this is around getting the relationship right, getting the structures right, and then over the period of the next 4 years, 3 or 4 years, is to get us into position to then start a conversation around the research. Not research up the front, but the research up the back. We just did a letter of support for this big funding grant that's coming up, and the Institute, since 2015, has won something like $63 million in research that's either targeting Aboriginal families or has a benefit for Aboriginal families. That's $63 million in less than 4 years. What I'm not able to tell you today is to what degree does that money make the difference in the way that we need it to using the 12 closing the gap indicators as a simple measure. And that's the challenge that this Aboriginal Health Grand Challenge is going to provide for us as an organisation, to really start to look at what is it that we're winning and what is it that we're doing and how is it changing a net effect for Aboriginal families. So the vision for that and challenges, the health and wellbeing of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children are the same as other Australian kids. Pretty cool. This is our ultimate key performance indicator. How does our research positively change the health and wellbeing of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander kids living anywhere in the state from 1 week to the next? Research has a great capacity to allow itself to float. This is about deliberately creating a space of urgency by pushing hard into the space, saying, well, how is this going to change some effect? How will this create some positive net effect? We need to be mindful and act accordingly. In terms of the Grand Challenge, so I'll just quickly move through this. This was developed by one of the 3 co-investigators. So my job is to overall manage the project so we don't get in trouble. And with me in the seat, that's most likely. So I also one of the co-directors of the project. There's another gentleman called Professor Alex Brown, who's Australia's most preeminent Aboriginal scientist. He's going to lead our science program in the development of this, and particularly how we ensure that this research and the systems internal now match the ones that we're going to develop externally at a community level. And Julie Coffin, who's our most senior researcher in the social emotional wellbeing, who's located in the Kimberley and from the Pilbara, is going to lead our community engagement and co-design. So the 3 of us each have a piece of responsibility, and wrapped around any child is our family and our elders. So our elders are quite critical, and working through elders is going to be quite important in the way that we design this. And then working to our families to work to supporting our kids. So these are the 3. So wrapping around them is the 3 areas of work: scientific leadership, family and culture, and government and community. So they're the 3 pieces that the 3 pillars this will stand on. In terms of how we'll set it up, because I'm mindful that we're going to run out of time soon. What we anticipate already, because a lot of the science that we've done isn't going to be wasted. I like to look at the things that we've done to now as being a dress rehearsal of getting it right. You know what I mean? It wasn't about mean and nastiness that got us here. It wasn't about deliberate, those sort of ways that these conversations get right. In my heart, I know, because I've been there for 16 years, that people have been working furiously to bring about positive change for our kids and our families in our community, have committed themselves to do the absolutely right thing. What this allows us now to do is to reposition ourselves in a conversation that brings us together in a way that holds us together in the first, and works through all of our skills to bring it together in a way that the family can make best benefit and sense of it. And these are some of the areas that we're going to deal with: intergenerational risk, social and emotional wellbeing, infection and immunity, health services reform, we really need to look at that, child development, education, and personalised and prevention. So they're the areas that we've got skills that we can bring into the game. But none of that is going to count until the community says, yeah, we need some of them. And that's the change in the relationship, which is freaking out all of the researchers, because some of these people have got 30 years in the game on some of these areas, and we're going to say, the community don't go, no, don't need that. Anyway, they will, because they're good people, but anyway. It's good to, people get, when people get scared, sometimes they get focused. So over the next 5 years, we're going to go through this particular process, and it is that we'll work over the next year, so work for a whole year to work with the community about developing a co-design, collaboration, communicate, connect, develop up the right structure and systems, and get it right. Then it's around taking the pulse. So what we'll do is then move into enrolling families into the project. And what we'll do at that point is then we will look at do a needs assessment of each of the families, and we'll start looking at develop a needs action plan so we can provide something practical right up front. Science and research has a great propensity to ask the participants to wait for 5, 10, 15, 20 years for the benefit of their research that they've involved in. We're saying we need to put something way up front. So we get the governance right, the connection, the relationship rights, put something that's significant back on the table first, so there's goodwill and intent, and then we move into the next stage, which is about doing a health assessment. So we end up with a health and wellbeing assessments for each and anyone who's living in those families, in those households, particularly the kids. So we end up with a baseline. And it's about then that being the central source of truth for all of us to make decisions around what are the things that we need to do next, that we want to do next. So that's really important. And all of that in the fourth stage is about creating what we call is the architecture for change. So out of those things will come either research projects that will look at particular issues, or it might be about health and educational services reform. How can we get better connection between these fantastic services that the government, the state government, whoever the local government's providing, schools and other services, and how do they make better sense? How are we better connected to these families so we can support them as they drive the agenda around wanting good things for their kids? So that's the ambition here. The thing that made it really exciting, because this all happened last year, this was my last year doing this stuff internal, because our contract with BHP had come to a conclusion. They said they wanted a good idea, so we put this together, and we took that to them, and they said, we like that idea, so we're going to give you $20 million. So they're going to give us $4 million for the next 5 years, and we're going to roll this out in Newman, Headland, and in the Perth Metro. So we're starting the consultation process in the Pilbara this year, and we'll start in the Metro in 2021, and then we'll follow those stages over the next 5 years. This is when we're all in. So we're going to be very vulnerable and naked as a consequence, and I think that's totally okay, because sometimes we allow some of the trappings of whatever it is that we do in life to actually get in the way of us as human beings. It's the most amazing place. I have the privilege of working at Telethon Kids Institute. These are amazing people. I've worked for 15 years in the state and Australian government, and I'm a Noongar. He's 55, will be 56 this April, with the experience that I've had. My life's journey is that everyone I've met wants really good things for kids, and particularly for Aboriginal kids. And there's not for want of lots of effort and attempts and shots at people trying to do the right thing to get it going. And there's been some net benefits. The fact that I'm standing here is testimony that some of those policies must have worked. The thing that's obvious for me is if we're in so furious agreement around wanting good outcomes for kids, then what's stopping us? What is stopping us? And that is what I think is the heart of the question of the grand challenge. What is stopping us? And if we can understand that, then what can we do to stop those things getting in the way of us creating great things for kids and for ourselves and for our communities? Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Glenn. I think this is Glenn's talk this morning is really consistent with a lot of things that have happened over the last 2-3 days, particularly about challenging the perception. I like your idea of, here's the report, it's 12 years on. How about we flip it on its head and look at it from a different perspective? And you're hearing a lot of this during this conference as well. So on behalf of everyone here, thank you very much again for joining us as our keynote speaker. Thank you, Glenn. Now, one thing I should have asked as Glenn grabs his bag, are you going to be around for some morning tea a little bit later, or do you need head off? No worries. I'm sure there'll be ways and means we can get in touch with you if anyone's got burning questions they want to ask, especially about the research that's about to happen. Okay. Thank you, Glenn. We now have 2 more speakers for this morning before going off to morning tea, talking about perceptions, expectations and reality. We have Amanda Mace. Please make her welcome. We might want that up a little bit higher. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, right for me.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. I don't know how to follow that. How fabulous was that talk? I don't know how to follow it, but I will try. I'm going to talk really about the gap that probably a lot of us felt were there, but we couldn't prove it. And I've got some evidence today. So our goal in all of this was last year, and certainly the Perth community, but many of you would know that WebKey distributed some surveys, both organizational and user surveys. And what we were looking for really was to gather some evidence to stuff that we felt we already knew, was that there was a difference, potentially, between what organizations thought they were doing in accessibility and what the user was actually experiencing, and then kind of to get some comparative data. So we knew at the time that there wasn't any recent data where we had users and organizations at the same time where we could compare that data, and we wanted that. We wanted to know if organizations felt they were doing a good job. And from a survey basis, being able to say it in a survey rather than publicly, because we all know you get up here and you say all the good things, but what did they really feel? Did they think they were really doing a good job at accessibility? And did the users agree with that? So what was their actual experience? We really wanted to get some sort of idea. We found that, I won't tell you, spoiler alert, there's a gap. But we got sort of a little, while we're putting together the questions, we went, well, there's some more we want to know. Like, what are the biggest issues facing users still? What are the biggest issues facing organizations? What do they still have concerns about? So we were actually able to get all of that, and a little bit more, to be honest, more than I thought we would. But today I'm going to talk about that perception organizations have of themselves, and then the reality of the user experience, according to this survey. So I'll get into the responses. These slides are showing, the following slides are going to show the responses of the organizations on how accessible they believe their product is. And we will talk about WCAG, we talk about perceived compliance as well as actual compliance, just how well they think they're doing. So the great news is, and I'm a really positive person, so let's start with the great news. More than 90%, 91.5 I think it was, believed that accessibility was important for their organization. Now, there is a small caveat to this, is that we put them out there. We had a really great response, both from organizations and from the users, but the message was being spread by people who were already in accessibility, or at least had a mind for it. So there's a small caveat to this wonderful result, is that people who were spreading it were already fighting the good fight within their organization. So I do want to put that out there, but that's a really fantastic and exciting result. We should be excited about that. People are thinking and talking about digital accessibility. They think it's important. So 71% of the organizations that responded had undertaken some sort of evaluation for accessibility, and almost half of those, so 46%, believed, had actually done their in-house testing rather than external testing. Now, there's a couple of different views of this. One is, great, people are doing in-house testing, but the other is that idea of checking your own homework. My kids think that's a great idea, but it's not actually ideal. We very much want to use the carrot rather than the stick, but I want to put it out there. This is exactly what GNC in America got in trouble for. So for those of you who are unaware, Gomez versus GNC is the lawsuit I'm talking about. Basically what happened was GNC got up and said, we're accessible because we used WAVE, and it said no errors. And the judge determined that GNC did not have the expertise to read the WAVE report, let alone declare their website accessible, and they lost that lawsuit. Gomez won. So while we don't have that sort of litigious environment here in Australia, it's probably important to note that in America, they've really solidified the need for accessibility experts, for our expertise as professionals. And I think it's a bit of a win in our corner to say, you need to know what you're talking about. You can't just say you understand it. You need to know what you talk about. And maybe that goes a bit to our broader conversation when we talk about the future of Aussie Way and recognizing professionals in this field. Despite the fact that we typically design mobile first, everyone has a mobile first approach, more than half, or less than half, or just under half, are not testing for mobile accessibility at all, full stop. And I actually found that quite surprising, because certainly from a QA testing point of view, this is something we are doing, and it's not happening from an accessibility point of view. And it may go a bit to Gion's point yesterday, is that there's not a set of guidelines that people are really following. They're trying to adapt WCAG to it. So we asked people to kind of break down what sort of testing they had done, and it was a really pleasant surprise to see that more than 50% were testing not just compliance, not just the checklist, they were using people with disabilities to do usability testing. 17% said that they had tested for technical compliance only, and only 5% said that they were, of that sort of breakdown, were using just the user testers. It's not a large majority, but I think that this is a really good sign. 53% are using compliance and user testing by people with disabilities. And I think that we probably, as accessibility professionals, owe a bit of a thank you to UXers for this one, because they have been driving the user-centric approach. So when we're, as part of our journey with clients and various customers, look to your UX people, because they are user-centric, and that's really what we are. So I just want to give a bit of a shout out to the UX designers who've really helped, certainly me in my journey, to get people describing what we're after, what we're doing this for. We also asked if, after testing, they had done any remediation and retesting. So a large majority are, 77%. That's actually not what I want. I want 100%. If you do testing, nothing is more frustrating for those of you in the room who do testing and compliance auditing. Nothing is more frustrating than handing over a report and nothing ever gets done with it. That's a very frustrating feeling. So 77%, while very good, I really want 100%. You remediate after you get your results, you fix it, and then you retest. Only 9.5 carried any sort of certification. Now, if we think back a few slides, you might remember that I said 71% have had their websites tested for accessibility, but only 9.5 stated that they carried any level of certification. There are two interesting points from this. One is that's actually a really low number, and I think that's something we need to consider as someone who works in the accessibility guidelines working group, that this is such a low number of certification claiming compliance. But the secondly is that we had some follow-up questions to this, which I didn't make slides for, but I think are important to this. We questioned the importance of compliance within the survey, and 50%, and even 50%, believed that compliance was necessary. 33% thought it was either a good investment, and then the rest all believed it was useful. No one thought that compliance wasn't useful or important. So it's really interesting that what we have is certification at a less than 10%. I just think those are interesting points. I haven't really drawn any conclusions on these, to be honest. I just think they're interesting points. Now, a majority, so despite my last slide, a majority felt their website was accessible. In fact, 57% felt that their website was accessible. 45% felt that they met WCAG, either 2.0 or 2.1. So how does that work, right? I just said that 9.5 said they had certification. So what we have now is a perceived idea of compliance. They believe they are meeting the standard. Maybe it's a good time to remind everyone that WCAG is, it's not a BuzzFeed quiz. It is an international standard, and there are ways to go about testing for it. It's interesting. I think the next slide is even more interesting. So, once it'll move, there we go. 21% believe that they're meeting WCAG 2.0 to level AA, which is what we aim for here in Australia, according to the advisory, the advice from the Human Rights Commission. 24%. And this does not reflect my experience in the industry, I have to admit. 24% believe that they were meeting WCAG 2.1 to level AA. And I have even better news. 2% believe they were meeting WCAG 2.1 to level AAA. The ones that are laughing are from accessibility firms. This low percentage brings up some very interesting questions about the attitude towards WCAG compliance, both perceived and actual. So these are perceived compliance numbers. And I just think we have to ask ourselves as an industry how this is happening. both the fact that they're low percentages, but then that people believe they're meeting this without testing for it on any sort of official basis. So as an industry, we have some questions to ask. There were some really positive results around incorporating digital accessibility as a standard operating procedure. So with a very small exception of only 7% where they said it wasn't defined or not even in consideration, there was a sub-question around this, around having a digital accessibility maturity model, which is quite popular in America in particular. Level Access came up with a model that I think most people probably use to rate sort of the maturity of an organization, where they are in their accessible journey. And only 14% said they were using one. Now, this had a global responses survey. I suspect, although I can't say, I suspect the ones who did have a maturity model were probably American respondents, because we just don't see it very often here. Another important part of this research was to ask what the organization's biggest issues still were. And the answers were really varied. We actually gave them far more than just these options, but these were the ones that were really popular. We let them tick as many as they needed. Accessibility training. And the interesting thing about the accessibility training, which at 19% was a pretty good result, 67% in an earlier sub-question of this had actually said that they have ongoing accessibility training for staff already happening. So it's really interesting. They want more training, which is great news for people like us and Intopia and Vision Australia. They want more training. So that's really good news for us. We had resources to test and fix issues, internal support, not surprising that that had a lot of responses. Needing information on requirements and compliance actually scored really low here. So there seems to be just a lack of priority given to the actual standards and what we need to do to meet them. So it would seem from the responses that we had from the organizations that they understand digital accessibility is important. Most respondents felt that their website was accessible. And now I want to tell you what the user experience was like. I feel like you know where this is going. So I'll start by saying that the survey was open to any individual, whether they had a disability or not. It had a global response, and I've listed some of the countries here that we got responses from, which was really exciting. So there's some pretty cool ones in there. Spain, Kuwait, Germany, France, Denmark. About 40% of the individual responses came from Australia, so you can tell it really was a global response. With all of the really good data that we got, and for the user survey, we had almost 100 people complete this survey. It's great data. Around the world, over 80% of the users who replied to this survey said that the accessibility laws in their country were not sufficient. Right, so we had that conversation yesterday with Andrew around accessibility laws here in Australia. This is a problem worldwide. People think it's not good enough. Well, 55% of the respondents to the survey identified as having a disability. 8% of those did not associate with any sort of disability support group. This is actually an important note for me as someone who does a lot of consulting, because I have had it said to me that people with disability have help training to know how to use and make things like settings on their operating systems easier for them to use. Aside from that being a very bold and big assumption, here we have evidence that not everyone's actually tapping into resources that are available. And that's assuming that all of these support groups actually have this information in the first place. As a part of understanding the broader scale of barriers, we also asked what other issues, aside from disability, affected people interacting with digital materials. Now, some said they had age-related issues. So an example of this would be, my lovely mother-in-law, who is fairly tech-savvy, but as she's gotten older, has a bit of a shake to her hand. And so she really struggles to use the trackpad and the mouse and prefers to use the keyboard. And in fact, the day I taught her how to tab to input fields was, you should have seen it. She was like, oh, wow. It was very exciting for her. So we know that people are being affected as they get older with how they engage with digital products. And this is actually, it's a really important note because for this generation right now, who's up and coming, people my age, we're not going to want to give up technology in 30 years from now, are we? We've been brought up with this. It's got a special challenge for my mother-in-law who wasn't brought up with the type of technology that we have today. She's got to learn it. Now, I'm going to have to give it up if we don't make this accessible. So it's really important that we look at those sort of issues and deal with them. Financial limitations topped the list of barriers, other barriers aside from disability. The Disability Pay Gap Equal and Human Rights Commission research report, which was done by Simonetta Longi, backs this up, where it found that there was approximately a 14% difference in the disability pay gap. So this really does exist, and it's particularly a hardship for people with disabilities. There were also responses around difficulty with access to technical support, advice, and just a lack of computer skills. So none of these are going to be a surprise to any in the room. The biggest issues facing users. Respondents were able to take as many issues as they felt were applicable to them, and the main issues were poor design. Anyone else relate to that? Yeah? Yeah, okay. CAPTCHA. How about this one? What did I say yesterday? Does the pole count as part of the sign? I just want to know. We think, right? Yes? The other ones that came into effect were things like poorly designed forms. What about finding relevant information? There's a very famous story that Vivian tells when she was trying to change her address. Trying to change her address at her bank, and she couldn't find the form online. And when she called, they said, "Well, you're looking for the wrong name. You're looking for change of address. You should be looking for change of domicile." What was that about easy English? All right, so clearly not just the survey, but for people in this room, there are some real usability issues that are accessibility issues, and they affect us all. These are the ones, if you're with an accessibility firm, take out your phones and take pictures now, because this is important. 65% of people state that they have left a website because of its inaccessible design. That is actually a huge number. And it includes respondents who didn't identify as having a disability. All right, so it's fair to say if you owned a company, you would take some notice of that number. As accessibility professionals, we often find it hard to make a business case for accessibility, something tangible. This is tangible. All right? And it gets even more interesting. 59% of the people who had complained to the owner of the website about accessibility, of those, 42% who complained did not go back to check if the issue had been fixed. You've lost that user. They're gone, probably for good. Those who did go back to check, anyone want to have a guess at how many actually found it was resolved? Oh, gee, it's not that bad. 12%. 12% had found the issue had been resolved. So you can understand why people aren't going back. Why would you bother? When we asked users, does a website's design, accessibility affect your impression of the organization? Right here in purple and red, because I like those colors, it says 95% said yes. That's a really big number. What a powerful statement that is. So I have all of these numbers, and I guess the question is, what do they mean? And the perception really from the organizations is that we get it, and we're doing it well enough. And the expectation is, and fair enough, if you get it, you should be doing it well, full stop. And the reality is that there's a gap here. There's a problem. We are not as good as we think we are doing, and we need to do better, and we can do better. And once we understand what the users need, that's really all we have. So that's it for me. I'm around for the rest of the day. Lots of you know me. Find me on Twitter. Find me on LinkedIn. Instagram, Facebook. I'm everywhere. Find me, talk to me. There are more results. I couldn't fit everything into 20 minutes. They were actually fairly big surveys, but come and chat to me about them. They were fascinating and really shed some light on what we're doing as a whole in our community.
Now, Mandy, you've already said you're around for the rest of the day,
yes.
so if we can just hold off any questions until the morning tea or lunch break to hunt Amanda down. And in answer to the question you posed at the start, how do you follow up a presentation like that? Like that. So thank you very much, Amanda. All right. I'll just find where the mouse has disappeared. Okay, we have one last speaker before we go off for morning tea, and I think you might know who this person is. A lady by the name of Bree Norton, whose presentation is about research ops, what is it, and where does accessibility fit in? Please make welcome Bree.
Thank you, everyone. So I'm a little bit of a mix of backgrounds. I'm a software engineer. I do accessibility, and I've recently been quite involved in the research ops community. Is anyone else here part of the research ops community? Has anyone heard of the research ops community? Yes, Adam's down here. Well, I'm going to share with you what the research ops community is and how we as accessibility experts can tap into that, and also that they might be basically looking to us as well as the research ops community starts to grow. So what is research ops? It's the mechanisms and strategies that set user research in motion. It provides the roles, tools, and processes needed to support researchers in delivering and scaling the impact and craft across an organisation. Now, this is a summary and a description that's provided by Team Reops. It's a global open community. They ran global workshops across the world a couple of years ago, and they developed a research ops framework to help support user researchers. It was about shaping a new practice that I think accessibility experts really do need to be a part of, and a community that we can really tap into. And it was also about making friends. So what they did is they did this workshop to try and work out what is involved in research operations and operationalising user research. And I've got up here on a slide some details